Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Cool. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing, brother?
Thank you. Really happy to be there. Look forward to having a great chat with you. Thank you.
Mate, our sort of serendipitous meeting, it probably came a little while ago, and I love this about so many guests that we have on the podcast. There's such a cycle with some of our guests, because I think we first met, was it maybe 2 years ago at the Emergency Services Show?
At the Emergency Services Show, and I missed you last time.
Yeah, I've just ruptured my right patellar tendon, so I'm post-surgery as we speak. I'm physically inhibited, which gives me some wonderful opportunities, don't tell my employer, to spend a lot of time on the podcast, funnily enough. But no, so I'm doing a little bit of working from home, mate. How did you find it this year, though?
It was really good again. It was really nice to meet up with a lot of partners. Yeah, I think it's the 5th time, and we were there with a team of 10 people strong. And apart from meeting all the customers, it was also great team building. You know, you stay in the hotel close to the emergency services show venue. You have dinners and drinks together after the show. It's just really nice to get together again.
Mate, that's a huge testimony to yourself and kind of the way that you run Fire Service Rota, because I mean, the first time we kind of met each other, I think there was maybe 3 or 4 people there, but your commitment to being able to bring your whole team over there, because ultimately what we're going to speak about today is almost a digital platform and a way in which you solve the problems of fire and rescue services all over the world, and obviously some of the work you've been doing with a few of the brigades and services here in the UK. But I wanted to sort of start by asking about the elevator pitch on Fire Service Rota and how it all kind of got started. And then we'll go into how on earth you've grown to the level that you are now, really.
I think what we're doing comes down to allowing firefighters to be free when possible and be available when needed. That's it.
Man, you spent some time nailing that down, because most people are still stuck in a waffle. Do you know what I mean? I say, if you can't articulate what you're doing in a sentence or two, and you'll know this far better than me, I know it's something you'll spend so much time with the team about, then you don't fully understand the problem that it is you're trying to solve. Most people think about giving a service, but like you've said exactly there, what every business is trying to do is solve a problem, isn't it?
Yes, it's become increasingly more challenging to be a firefighter as well as a parent or a worker or any other commitments you have in life, and balancing all that is really some magic going on there. And if we can help do that, that would make me really, really proud and happy to contribute to eventually safety in communities in the UK.
Hey folks, I wanted to jump in here and just share with you a really exciting update from our partner William Wood Watches. They are launching the first ever field watch collection. Now it's named Fearless, which firstly, I absolutely love, and this new collection is very different from anything they've ever launched before. However, you will see that they've managed to maintain some of the signature William Wood Watch elements. The big thing for me is that black fire hose. So they have got, the first ever time they've done this, the black fire hose strap and a really, really cool case back. So now the watches are available in 3 colors this time. These are red, orange, which is my favorite, and the yellow. Each watch features those straps that are made up from repurposed black fire hose. That stuff looks the absolute bee's knees, guys. They've never done that one before. So go and take a look at that. And they've also got a textured dial to represent charcoal. You know, I mean, honestly, I never know how they're going to keep going deeper with this. Every time they do, I'm like, where are they getting this from? But I know where they're getting it from, because they're speaking to the boots on the ground. They're speaking to you, they're speaking to me, they're speaking to firefighters and frontline operators and getting just these amazing insights. The creativity in this is amazing. Now, the case has come down in size from 41mm to 40mm. And another new thing is they've got a unique firefighter helmet visor case back. So flip it on the back. In fact, go over to the website and you'll see the photos. That visor case back, guys, it just looks absolutely incredible. Now, the watches are available to buy immediately, like right now, and they can be delivered within 24 hours in the UK and 48 hours from UPS collection in the US. The link to William Wood Watches is in the notes below this episode. You will not regret it. I am 100% putting this on my list. I'm going to be nagging them like crazy, because I know you can pay in 3 stages as well. You haven't got to go in full whack on this. The new Fearless collection, William Wood Watches. Go check it out. Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's actually become even more of a barrier in like the past maybe 7 or 8 years I've found it. So I was an on-call or retained or volunteer firefighter, depending on where people are listening, what their terminology is. I did it for about 11 years. And when I first joined, there was still a bit more of freedom within our communities and things weren't perhaps as challenging in terms of parenting and COVID and finances and everything that we've perhaps seen come to pass over the past 5 years. And it really is a massive barrier. When I speak to a lot of chiefs in fire and rescue services, certainly in the UK, trying to get people into their on-call systems and even their whole-time systems, despite the fact they've tried to diversify with a number of different work patterns and flexible working patterns, it ultimately does come down to people being able to strike that work-life balance. And your system and my experiences with it are something that really gives people a very immediate, firstly, very interactive and a very simplistic way for people to be able to manage their home and work life versus what, with the greatest of respect, will have perhaps been more of a dictatorial approach when I first joined, where it was you needed to provide maximum cover all of the time, which can lead to a lot of personal frustrations when people are looking to take their children somewhere, or they want to have a day out and they spend their entire day or entire weekend on call, only to learn that they weren't required because there was surplus to requirement on the vehicles.
Exactly, or the other way around, finding out that you were available, but missed the shout just because you thought you weren't needed while you actually were. Yeah. So it goes both ways. And
I remember when I first joined this, we were doing this just on A3 pieces of paper, mate, and you can only imagine how horrific this was. You had to basically go down to the fire station, and it was a huge, in fact, it was probably A2 or something like that, huge piece of paper covered in different covered highlighters, Tipp-Ex, notes, and it was just an absolute colossal nightmare. I spent a period of time managing it at my station, and the only innovation I managed to get was to move it onto Excel, so it was a bit more digital and we had a little bit of tracking involved with it. But again, it involved some people driving quite some distance to be able to come in and plan their entire week ahead. So take me back to how you actually found this niche and found this need.
Well, actually, you've already introduced it. You were speaking about Excel. And I sometimes say we eat Excel sheets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I've come to appreciate fire services fixing their challenges using pen and paper, Excel sheets, even wooden pegs in the station, anything. Yeah. Because it is evidence of a real problem and a real need for a solution. And people are willing to put the effort in it. So I've come to appreciate that. And basically that same spreadsheet was the start of Fire Service Rota back in 2006. I was a student and I had been working in a local drum shop. So I was at first assembling drum kits and later on selling drum kits. I'm not a drummer myself, but you don't have to be a drummer apparently to sell drum kits.
Okay.
Shout out to my boss, Richard Boerstra at the time. He raised me sort of as an employee starting when I was 16 years old until I was a student. And in the drum shop, I had fixed a certain problem for him, being who was working when, and making sure we would always have a specialist in the drummers section and always a specialist in other sections as well. And a few years later, after I made that Excel sheet for him in the drum shop, he asked me, "Hey, Cor, can you do the same for my fire station? Because the problem is quite similar. We always need certain specializations available at all the time. And on the Saturday, I tried to piece it all together based on everybody's emails, text messages, verbal notes, whatever. And then on the Sunday, I've already lost track because everybody changed their week schedules. And I can no longer be sure about whether we can still crew the appliance on the Monday and the Tuesday. And when lives are at stake, that's no longer an option at some point. So he asked me, can you make me that Excel sheet also for my fire station? I suppose there is some money left in a pot somewhere. So you're a student, have a few tens of euros and try and make a solution.
Wow.
And then there was a critical decision. I said, well, actually, this sounds like a problem worth solving on the internet and not necessarily on an Excel sheet.
Were you not intimidated by that initial proposal? Sorry to interrupt you, because like being asked to assist in the crewing of an emergency services vehicle might seem a little bit intimidating for some people, but you sound as though you took it in your stride.
Good question. Probably I was too young to oversee the, the responsibility of that.
Okay.
And on the other hand, I knew what they were coming from, right? They did not have any kind of overview. So anything would be better than that. And you have to realize at the time, I was not thinking about starting a company. I was only thinking about solving a problem with just some tools and technology that I happened to master. I was a self-taught software developer. And just as a hobby, I invested maybe 100 or 200 hours programming a website and just gave it to them and said, okay, have fun with it. I hope this helps. Never expecting them to get back and say, hey, actually the neighboring station wants it too, and their neighbors too. So that quickly spiraled out of control afterwards. But initially, it just felt like a nice technical challenge that I could solve.
Wow. So how old would you have been at this point? Sorry.
I guess I was 22.
So you were doing this alongside your studies and obviously working at the drum shop as well?
Yes, exactly. I was finishing my master's degree, and I think I had just stopped working at the drum shop to finish my master's degree, to focus on writing my thesis. But Richard had become a friend, and that's how he found me. And I still remember where I took the phone call. It was actually in the physics lab where I took the phone call, and that's basically where the idea got started.
So after you first created these initial ones, and you obviously recognized that there was a need across several stations, did it continue to develop from there, or what was the moment where you thought that maybe this is a national issue or a global issue? Because you obviously at some point took that big leap to decide to make it an official company, and then progressively it seems to have grown into a behemoth that it is today.
Well, we haven't grown into a behemoth, and maybe I never want to. But yes, we have grown considerably since then. When did it dawn that this was serious? I suppose it took me about a year to understand how quickly this went. And the nice thing about having fire services as customers is that they don't compete among themselves. Actually, when you give them nice tools and they're happy with it, they will tell their neighbors and they will sell it to themselves.
Okay.
So that is what quickly happened. And before I knew it, I was copy pasting a set of files and a set of database tables every time a new station asked to join. And, we never really thought about how much should it cost or how much should we charge. I would say for the first few years, actually still in hobby mode, just because we loved doing it and we loved helping out other fire stations. I remember I loved going to those stations. I have to confess, I'm not a firefighter myself. It was Richard who was a firefighter at the time, the commander at the station, 27 years of experience over there. So both of us, we loved going out there to the stations and learning about the local ways of working. And, it sounds like they're all working in the same way. And yes, basically they have the same challenge, but they found so many different ways to tackle those challenges. So yeah, as you grow, as you see more fire stations, you have to be flexible and also support different kinds of working. So it's always interesting what you can find in a new fire station.
What were some of the common issues that you found when it came to trying to integrate the software that you were then developing into these new, because it sounds like most people were very receptive of these inputs, but some people can really struggle with change. So, I mean, both from when you first started, but also working with people now, how is it you managed to sort of bring people onto this approach of changing onto a new system, and what are the challenges that you see people facing with it?
I think you have to be flexible and offer multiple ways, because a person working behind a desk, having access to a computer all the time, can be really easy to just open a website, change your availability, a few clicks later, you're done, and you have a nice overview of the impact of that. But if you're working in the field or as a construction worker, then it's very different. You might not even have a smartphone. Just remember, we're talking 2006. When this all got started, hardly anybody had a smartphone. But pretty quickly, we found out that people wanted to be able to make a phone call or send a text message, an SMS, to book yourself on and off. So we supported all those kinds of different ways to manage your own availability. And as soon as smartphones became a big thing, of course, we built a smartphone app, and that made things a lot easier for a lot of people. But depending on age and depending on background and depending on employment, yes, people have different preferences. Having firefighters in our own team, Richard being a firefighter and having direct access to our end users, speaking to them on a daily basis and getting, that is something really nice about firefighters. You do get instant feedback if it doesn't work. So,
yeah. We can be wonderfully blunt if we need to be, which is effectively what you need as well, because that gives you that data as quick as possible. Because otherwise, the worst possible outcome is that people politely decline and never truly give you the feedback on how to iterate and develop the system, because it's gone through several iterations as to what it is today.
That's it. Yeah, I guess some people call that eating your own dog food. So we did. And another key success in that was my own ability to then immediately implement those things. We did not have to go to some development team far away, transfer of knowledge. No, when Richard called me in the afternoon, often I had built it in the evening. I said, "Hey, Richard, it's there, it's online. Can you give it a try?" And then he would go to his colleagues and ask, "Hey, does this work for you?" And that quick cycle of learning and improving has been very valuable, and it still is.
That sort of, I know, like you said, you've grown the team and stuff like that, but that level of reactiveness must be a very challenging thing to scale. Or do you believe, I know we're kind of jumping forward a little bit now, do you believe you're at a point now where you have boxed off and accommodated for the vast majority of challenges that fire and rescue services are facing worldwide? Because we're going to get into some of the people that you now work with in the UK, because obviously this is branched across different nations now.
I don't think I have the courage to assume that we are done tackling all the challenges.
Okay.
And it's also nice
Very humble of you
to keep yourself challenged, right? So a few years ago, we accepted a new challenge because initially we started planning on-call firefighters. Some years later, we took on the challenge together with a UK customer. It is Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service, to build a whole-time rostering solution on top of that on-call system. And a few years ago, we took a step further and also implemented primary alerting services. And that is to say, alerting services using smart devices, that can be a smart pager or a smartphone, to be part of the primary alerting chain. For us, that felt like a huge responsibility, because all of a sudden we changed from a system that can be down for about an hour. If it doesn't really work, the planning has already happened, people are available, they're responding to their pagers, so lives are being saved. But as soon as you become as soon as you become part of that critical process, then all of a sudden, if your system doesn't work, lives may be lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that, they have obligations to meet these turnout times and stuff like that. So you can start getting into some very hot water very quickly.
Yes. And we decided to step into that hot water, take a really careful approach, step by step. We partnered with some other leaders in the marketplace. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call their names if it's commercial. Pete,
you can say whatever you like, buddy.
Yeah, right. So, for example, Samsung we're working with, Falk in Denmark we're working with, and we built this now really robust and fast solution that allows primary alerting through smartphones and smart pagers. We're really proud to present this also in other countries.
Was there any nervousness around self-service coverage and things like that? Because I think what you're saying is absolutely fantastic. I've never experienced anything like that in the services that I work for. Even now, we are still reliant on a pager system for the majority of our turnouts. And that, again, puts onus on the individual to ensure that they have it on them, that it's charged, because people often get into the habit of, when I'm not on call, I just take it off, and I put it somewhere else, or it's in the car, or it's upstairs. For better or worse, we tend to not be more than a meter away from our smartphones at any given time of our life in this day and age, which is obviously a great insight from yourself to utilize that sort of technology. But it also comes with its own inherent challenges around service and, signaling and all that sort of jazz.
That was a big challenge indeed. Getting those push notifications across reliably and fast, that was a big technological challenge. And together with the partners I just mentioned,
Hmm.
we figured it out how to do that. And
I'm confident you'll lose me. Sorry, I'm confident you'll lose me. But could you just tiptoe me into the shallow water of what system, and unless it's you're not able to share it due to copyright or whatever it might be, but what system does it work on? Or will that give the game away to competitors? Sorry.
So we work with the big platforms, Android and Apple iOS.
Okay.
And when you send an alert message to those platforms, you have to work with the services from Google, Android, and Apple. And you have to tell them, hey, deliver this message to this smartphone. And it's time sensitive, it's critical. And more recently, it even became possible to break through the silence locks of smartphones, which was really a big enabler for us.
Yeah.
And then you get into a struggle of choosing the right technology to build your app, basically to put the software code in or onto. So you make a lot of decisions along the way, also some mistakes that you have to revert, things you have to try, some things that work reliably, some others don't. You have to think about backup mechanisms. So what happens if we cannot reach a certain firefighter because, a cell tower can be down, can be a power outage. Can be the smartphone itself can be broken or discharged. So there's many factors.
If my phone is dead, it will tend to still wake. Its alarm still works. Do you know what I mean? If it fully runs out of battery, the alarm will still go off in the morning, even if it only goes off very briefly, because I imagine that sits in a separate system. And I know it's a very simplistic example, but does this level of software sit within that same realm whereby as if the phone is fully discharged, will it? I imagine it won't. It won't be able to send a notification if the phone thinks it's empty.
No, don't expect it. But we have taken some extra technological measures to tell the phone, especially on Android, don't put us in power saving mode. So if the phone goes into power saving, we will not be killed in the background. So you have these
God, you bloody
programs.
have thought about it, haven't you? I'll tell you what, mate, because these must be, I'm sure you've had these questions before, but these would be, I can imagine sitting with my service and trying to pitch them the idea. They're like, oh, what if it's in silent? What if it's, and like you say, you bang, you already boxed all these off, sorry.
Yeah, and it's only half of the story because we still assume that we can't always reach all of the firefighters. And that's why we have backup mechanisms. So first of all, if you compare this with an ordinary pager receives its alert and it's fire and forget. Actually, the operator, the person sending the alert, will never know whether the pager received the alert because it's one way. Well, the good thing about smartphones and smart pagers is that it can send the signal back. That's really interesting because then all of a sudden you get the option to receive a confirmation of the alert being received.
So that individuals are mobile to the station effectively.
Yeah, and
love it.
We also added heartbeats. So our app, our primary alerting app, will send a heartbeat every minute to our server. Hey, I'm alive. Hey, I'm still connected. Hey, this is my battery level. Hey, I'm still good. Every minute. So we know upfront, actually, with pretty high reliability, whether we can reach that one individual's smartphone. So that works.
So what
really
happens
well.
if, for example, you have a station that's on a minimum level crewing of 4, and as part of this heartbeat backup software, it loses connection with one for... Is there a flag that comes up that says, we haven't received a notification back from this cell phone for half an hour, therefore theoretically we can only guarantee that 3 people may receive a notification should we send one? That's a very detailed and elaborate question. I apologize for it, but go on.
I like to be challenged, and I'd like to be able to respond to the worst case scenarios like this one. And what would then happen is that we would still try to alert that one individual that we know the smartphone is probably not working. That's because we have multiple channels. We can send SMS text messages. We can send an actual phone call. And if the person has a smart pager, we can also still send that signal to the smart pager. And there could be a reason that the heartbeat is failing, but actually the alert push notification would still come through. So we still try, and then we wait. We don't wait for 5 minutes. We wait, for example, for 30 seconds for the individual to pick up the phone, press a button to confirm attendance. If the person doesn't do that, then the system has a function built in to look for backup. So it would then automatically find, say the person that's missing is a driver.
Mm-hmm.
It would then quickly identify any other skilled drivers in the station, send them an extra alert to say, hey, there's a situation of crewing deficiency. Please respond if you can. Sort of an increased urgency call to save the day.
You guys have really, really gone into some detail on this. I wanted to ask you about, because you got us talking about Shropshire, and I feel like I interrupted you. So was Shropshire your first UK client?
Yes, they were. Yes.
Because you've now got Warwickshire, and I imagine you've probably got a few more in the pipeline now. I wanted to ask you about this aspect of geofencing, because when I was looking up on the website, it was something that particularly piqued my interest, not only because it sounds really interesting, but when I started to learn a little bit more about it. But for people that are unfamiliar, can you just go through what geofencing is and how you came up with the idea for that?
Geofencing is an instrument through which we track your location. Now, that sounds really scary. And
these are some things that sound scary to people, yeah. And
yes, exactly.
Because that's where I think some services, because we've tried to do things over mobile phones before, but some people get very funny. They're like, but are you going to pay for my mobile phone then? And we're like, no, because it's only this isn't going to cost you anything. It's just a minimal. But then again, we are technically relying upon it as a means to run our service. So maybe we'll discuss that again in a minute. Sorry, but go on.
Well, the reason why I said it was scary is not necessarily because of cost, but because of privacy. Yeah. You don't necessarily, especially not as an on-call firefighter, you don't want the service to always know where you are. You don't want
firefighters aren't always the places that they're supposed to be as well,
exactly.
Which can be a bit of an issue.
So that's why I emphasize this feature is switched off by default. Even if managers tell us to switch it on, we can only enable the feature for firefighters, as in make it available, but they will still have to switch it on their devices to say, yes, okay, I'm fine, I'm confident, I feel relaxed sharing my location. And then there can be two benefits for the firefighter, because we truly believe that anything we build must be to support firefighters, and not necessarily to micromanage them or make their lives more difficult. No, really support them. And we do support them in two different ways. One is, if they are showing available on the rota, and they go too far away from the station, outside of the available zone, wouldn't it be a good idea to warn them? To say, hey, it looks like you're going away from the station while you haven't booked off. Are you sure you don't want to book off? Or firefighters can even decide to let the system book off automatically if the system sees they're too far away from the station.
Oh, really? It can drop them out of the system straight away?
Yes, it can. For example, some firefighters work as construction workers. They have a client just outside of the available zone. Sometimes they go back home or at the depot to pick up some materials and then back out, in and out of that zone. And they can decide for the system to book them on and off whenever needed.
That in itself, sorry, I know I just don't want to rush past that, because that in itself is a real game changer. I know very many times when I've just wanted to pop over to somewhere that's maybe 30 minutes away from where I live, and couldn't be asked to go and down station, and maybe people won't appreciate hearing this, and do the whole rigmarole of booking off and booking on. So I have many a time, gone outside of the station area and gone, look, if I need to respond to my alerter, I'm just going to be I'm going to interpret the British road rules in a slightly different manner and try and get back as soon as I can, because it just becomes so difficult and complex to have to go and book on and off, even just for 15 minutes.
Exactly. Are you just admitting you're being human? Because I suppose all firefighters.
Yeah, and that's it. And we almost discourage people from being truthful, don't we? Hey folks, just wanted to jump in with a quick piece around firefighter health and wellbeing. Now, we get a lot of messages and emails into the podcast around firefighter health and fitness, whether you are trying to join the fire service and pass them tricky fitness tests, if you are currently serving, or if you are coming up to that next chapter of your life, retiring from the emergency services. we get so many different questions around it. So in partnership with Fitness for the Frontline, we have come up with a series of guidance and programs specifically designed to reflect the physical elements of the role of a firefighter. So whether it's carrying an LPP across an overgrown field, lifting a ladder above your head under running it, or wrestling with cutting gear for 30 plus minutes at some kind of complicated RTC, our bodies are required to lift, push, and carry objects in very specific circumstances. That is effectively what Fitness on the Frontline focuses on, as well as the longer term aspects of overall health and wellness for our firefighters. There are focuses around strength endurance, and overall conditioning, all achievable and relevant to our roles. Now, we are definitely not about to be smashing out world records or getting that beach body ready in 6 weeks rubbish. The systems and programs that we put in place are adjusted for people's current fitness levels, and they're not a prescriptive weight or a one-size-fits-all BS. We also take into consideration all the fitness testing for initial application and also for current firefighters who want to maintain and progress their fitness levels. It is very likely for myself personally that I'm still going to be a firefighter when I'm 60 plus, so longevity in the role is really important to me, and I know it is for so many people out there. The system has a built-in ability to adjust easily depending on the equipment you have available, your fatigue levels, or if you're coming off busy ass night shifts and you haven't got a lot of time to work out. You can record your results, log your weights, your body measurements. We've got all the facilities to do that. The system is yours to use how you want to train. We've taken all the fluff and the gimmicks and the BS away from most of the rubbish that you see out there. And this is designed by experienced operational firefighters and qualified people, including myself, with members of the team available to contact throughout the time you are within us in the program. If you ever get stuck, if you're starting to struggle, and also to celebrate those wins and achievements with you. It all starts with no obligation, 7 days worth of the programming, absolutely free. So whether you're joining, serving, or looking at the next chapter in your life, have a glance in the link for the podcast. Fitness for the Frontline is designed by firefighters for firefighters. Now back to the show.
Exactly, it's life, and you're still an on-call firefighter. And in the Netherlands, that means that you can actually decline a call, even if you're showing available in the station. That is not encouraged, of course, but you can have good reasons for it. So yeah, you can be booked off automatically, and your colleagues know that you won't be available for that 30 minutes that you're out. So nobody's waiting for you, and that signal of confirmation of attendance, or whether we were able to alert you, that doesn't just stay within your group of colleagues within the station, but it can also be relayed to dispatch, to fire control, to say, hey, actually, we have a full crew for this station, everything's good. Or after 2 minutes, we're still struggling to find that driver. And fire control can then decide within 1 or 2 minutes to say, okay, the criticality of this incident is so high, we are going to mobilize the second appliance. So that decision making can be a lot faster if you just get quick confirmation of attendance.
Yeah,
even if the firefighters
at your hands, don't you? Yeah.
Exactly. Even if they haven't arrived to the station yet, it's nice to know if they're on their way. And that's the second benefit of the geofencing feature that you just mentioned. We can also enable firefighters to show their location on a map close to the station while going to the station, responding to an incident.
Now, does the service or the system interpret who is selected, therefore, to be mobilized? Because some issues with, so there's two sides to this coin, really, and I'm sure you'll have an answer for both. So some services, don't want to mobilize their entire fleet of on-call individuals at a station, because obviously there's an associated cost with those individuals all turning into the station when you only need 4 or you only need 6 or whatever it may be. However, there's also the flip side where it would potentially be unfair to preference the 4 or 6 individuals closest to the fire station at all times, because there'd be no incentive for those other individuals to be on call at the same time, and ultimately they'd be getting less experience, less exposure, even though they will be able to turn in within their contractual obligated time. If it did work solely on a geographical basis on who are the nearest people, I'm not saying that it does, then that would cause a couple of issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get your question. First, I want to correct. We do not alert based on the location of people. We Perfect. Just alert a team based on some logic that is chosen by the fire service. And then firefighters can opt in to display their location on the station dashboard. And the benefit of that for firefighters that live a little bit further away is that their colleagues can actually see where they are and how long it's going to take for them
So this is displayed information up on the so as in, for example, people turn in, they put their tallies on the board usually in most services, and then there's like a visual indicator as to who's been notified where, and potentially a map to say geographically where these individuals might be. That's something that people can look at as soon as they get in, so they know how far away their driver or their incident commander is.
That's correct. Yeah. Wow. We have dashboards showing the location of the incident, the route to the incident, who is expected in the station, and within that group, who confirmed the alert, who confirmed the attendance. We have Google Street View, so you get a general idea what kind of an object you're going to.
So is this something that they then utilize on the vehicles, on the appliances? This isn't just like on a screen in the appliance bay? Because I'm forgiving myself now, because like you said, this stuff is on tablets and it's on smartphones. It can pretty much be on any device. So are you finding it common practice that they're having it on their mobile data terminals in the fire engines? Is that what's happening?
Not so much, no. It's actually indeed a television screen in the appliance bay. Usually the mobile data terminals contain much more information that is related to the actual incident, any plans, any hazards, those details we don't have.
Okay. I wanted to get back to asking you about the whole time integration. So for full-time firefighters, and what significant challenges or differences you found with this, because obviously different from an on-call station, you find there's a lot of covers and changing shifts and people hanging back and overtime and a whole raft of other complexities that possibly require a lot more interaction from the manager themselves as well, being able to access this system and make their own modifications. And how have you navigated that one, and how much of it is done? How much integration is allowed by the manager, I suppose?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we have really had to learn what flexibility looks like. Not only to the on-call firefighters, we were well aware of that, but also for whole-time firefighters. And for whole-time firefighters, it looks quite different, because they have a contract and they have to fulfill that number of hours in a certain period, and they want to be as flexible as possible while still fulfilling those hours. So concepts like exchanging your shift with somebody else, or being called for an extra shift, some overtime maybe. You all want to do that in a flexible but also fair way. There's quite some nice experiences we have with for example, those overtime shifts. There's a customer that we did implement the feature of an extra shift request for. Basically, that is identifying a shift that is in need of extra crewing, sending out a request through a push notification or an email to a number of firefighters. And at the time, the first firefighter who responded got the shift.
You know what, mate? That is such a great, and I mean, it's great to see that you have the freedom to be actually able to integrate that, because I'm sure there'll be no surprise to anybody listening that basically what happens otherwise is WhatsApp groups get set up and they're messy and they are a nuisance, and we're not allowed to swap shifts in a lot of services, mostly because somebody just hasn't had the appetite to do the work that you're doing. It's probably a little bit too complex for them and they're worried about overstepping some kind of rules. So what happens is firefighters bounce around these WhatsApp groups, kind of get a non-formal virtual handshake agreement that someone's going to cover for somebody else. You're not technically allowed to swap the payment, so you're basically paying somebody cash on the side for them to come and do your shift for them, and the service doesn't know any different. Sometimes you don't even bother swapping the name, and sometimes you swap the name and there are questions asked as to why you're doing it, and you basically have to say, I'm doing it for free just as a favor, which is a lie. So let's just be honest. You know, it's great to see that systems are now there to help people out in these ways without them having to dig into all their own personal leave and stuff like that.
That's it. Oftentimes you find that inflexibility in services is just because their old technology did not support it. So they lost the overview, and you mentioned it. The overview is lost in WhatsApp groups or even email threads or phone calls notes. You know, planners sometimes have hundreds or thousands of firefighters to supervise. And if they have to keep track of all the shifts that take place over a phone call, that's impossible.
Yeah.
If only there was a system that just sent out requests, collected the answers, and then would create an audit trail of what happened, who responded when, and who got the shift for who. So that's what
I'd love that, because it reminds me of, I forget what company it was. It was an American company, and they were going through a time of difficult financial challenges. And basically what they said was, everybody needs to lose, for example, 10 shifts. So they need to lose 10 shifts over the year so that everybody can collectively share the pain, and ultimately the company makes a big saving in order to help the company keep going. Now, I know this sounds a very loose connection to the fire service, but what actually ended up manifesting, because they gave people the freedom to do this, they said, do it however you like. And what happened naturally was people that wanted to do more shifts were doing their own and then picking up the shifts from other individuals. And those individuals who actually wanted more time off anyway, perhaps they're in a different part of their life, or maybe they had childcare commitments, or maybe they just wanted to work a little bit less, or they had a separate venture that they wanted to explore, were just given freedom to work a little bit more. Now, I know in the fire service, we still have obviously a contractual obligation to ourselves and the public to ensure that we maintain our skill set. But for me, as long as your skill sets are up to date and you are still remaining an integrated member of your station, you're not having multiple weeks off on a regular basis, I think that is a massive game changer in giving people the freedom to manage their work-life balance as they see fit in what is now just continuing to become a more and more complex life for people to try and juggle.
It is. Yeah, and offering them that flexibility will help them be a more effective firefighter, stay with the service longer. But
yes,
we have to realize that we are also allowing these people to be more effective, if that's the right word, as a father or as a mother or as a worker,
Because if you don't look after that bit at home, nothing else matters. As soon as your castle starts to crumble at home, your relationships and everything's lost. You can't operate professionally when you're in a position of vulnerability at home.
True. You need those supporting pillars for you.
100%.
So if we can facilitate that, and we got some great testimonials for introducing Fire Service Rota in new teams, with even some spouses getting back to us saying, we have just had the first weekend out of the city, away from the station for the first time in a year, because we knew there were enough of the colleagues available, and we could just book off and know that the fire engine would crew. So those are amazing stories, because we're really helping firefighters live the lives that they want. That's basically why we're in the game, to help communities be safe and to let firefighters live the lives they want. Have all the commitments that they want in life.
I wanted to ask you about one statement on the website, which some people may read and may worry them, and I'm sure it's probably something we've answered already, so I may be asking you to repeat yourself. But it does speak about optimizing crewing for financial performance, and when people hear words like that, sometimes they get a little bit worried that they again, it's the question around not being mobilized or being selectively chosen out. Can you just, and you may just be repeating yourself, I apologize, but just also for the services benefit, because we have a lot of chiefs and individuals from different levels of different services that listen to this. When we say optimizing crewing for financial performance, can you just give me a few indications as to how you see that being the case?
First of all, I'm going to look for that sentence because it sounds really corporate.
It does sound very corporate, yeah. Sometimes it worries people.
Yes, it does. It worries me too. Fire and rescue services have to make the most with the resources, the limited
100%,
resources
absolutely,
that they have. So if you have the choice to pay for a resource that you don't need, or pay for a resource that you do need, you choose the latter. And if we can help save supernumerary shifts in the start of the year, save them up in the pot, and then allocate those shifts, this capacity, later in the year, where there might be sickness or where there might be extra leave allocated, then basically what we're doing is you're taking excess capacity from the start of the year and we're just redistributing that to the end of the year. Well, that very process saves overtime being paid, where we're just making use of capacity that is already paid for. That is one of those things through which we can save costs.
I was looking at some of the technical aspect, and I know this may not be the most exciting part for some people to listen to, but it was important for me because there's always a concern going back to, for example, the A3 pieces of paper, of these things getting lost and then having correct backups here and there, and people historically and services historically can be a little bit nervous about handing these types of responsibilities outside of their sphere of influence. When we talk about like saving money and stuff, though, a lot of this doesn't require services to have banks and banks of dedicated servers and all that sort of stuff. So could you just run me down how the system goes about backing itself up and what level of reliability fire and rescue services can expect from it?
I guess this is a great moment to shout out to my partner in business, Ruben Stranders.
Okay.
He's my partner since 2012 in this business. He has become the technological leader in our team. I'm no longer the developer that I used to be. I still miss it sometimes. I love the technology, but it's just not my strength anymore. And Ruben has come up with several ways through which we make sure
it is quite comprehensive. I was just looking through it on the on the features on the website itself. There, from my initial glance now, there seems to be at least 5 different backup methods, 3 of which I probably understand, which means the other 2 live out there somewhere in the ether.
So maybe I will use an analogy. I think you and I grew up in the time where there would be Mario on the Super Nintendo, the game.
Yes.
You know it? Yeah. Well, if you died, you had to start from scratch again.
Yes.
And that was quite painful. Now, that is the old way of doing backups, right? If something goes wrong, you take the backup of yesterday, you put it back, and you lose 24 hours of data. Well, of course, we have that snapshot backups, and we store it in a really safe place on many locations, encrypted with several layers of protection. So even if a hacker, God forbid, enters our system, he still couldn't delete the backups. But then there is another system that we're really proud of, and that is a mechanism that while you are playing your game is constantly pressing the save button, constantly, every second. We call that write ahead logs. You can forget about that. Some call it point in time recovery. Basically, it says if here at this very moment, somebody makes a gigantic mistake in the system, we note the time of day, and we say, okay, revert the system back to 1 second before it happened. And that is a really nice technology.
So that's almost like a respawn if we then bounce back to that, the analogy of the game, where we're now, it's like the immediate respawning where you are, so you don't lose that, because we've all had that feeling where we've been working on a document or working
Where's my progress? Yeah.
And exactly. And that's... on a personal level, it's very demoralizing, but on a fire service level, well, it could quite literally cost people's lives, to be honest with you.
I wanted to not skip over a certain topic, and that is the invitations to work in extra shifts. We talked about it a few minutes ago. One service we are super proud of is that this functionality, this feature, was actually used during the pandemic, and there were several of our customers that set up COVID support groups and rotas. There were hundreds of volunteers coming from various services supporting the vaccination and the testing efforts in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, everywhere we work. And most of them were firefighters. But here's the challenge. If firefighters go out of the stations, go out of the areas of the station to be a tester or to do the vaccinations, you have to be sure that the appliance is still on the run. And for several customers, we set up those rotas, and we allowed them to send out shift requests for the people working on the test sites in such a way that those shifts were distributed fairly across the team members that were available, but also avoiding any crewing deficiencies in the local fire stations. So not only did we save hundreds and many hundreds of hours of planners otherwise having to send emails or phone calls to individual firefighters asking them, hey, can you cover this shift in test center A, B, and C, and waiting for their answer, or not getting connection, or having to call back later. You know how difficult it can sometimes be. No, instead, we were able to send out thousands and thousands of push notifications. Firefighters were able to respond with a click on the button on their smartphones. Yes, I can work this shift. No, I cannot work that shift. planners would get warnings: if you invite this firefighter, you will take the appliance off the run because he's the last available driver. So they could avoid that and choose somebody else instead.
It's really smart technology.
And we used that during the pandemic to facilitate crisis response in the UK. And we're really proud of that.
That's not on the website.
It isn't, is it? Oh.
You need to get, or maybe I've missed it. That is a massive success story. That article or blog or however it manifests, because that's an incredible thing. And that again, for me, you kind of triggering my entrepreneurial mindset here. That demonstrates such an incredible scalability of this tool that you now have developed. There must be an aspect of discipline in trying to continue to stay focused on what you do so very well versus racing off and offering this service, because I imagine this is an issue common to fire and rescue services, most definitely, but it's an issue common to most workplaces, in all honesty.
Yeah. It's a problem that exists everywhere. But I've made a conscious decision to work with fire services. And yes, we do a couple of other areas, but 99% of our customers are fire services. And I love the industry. I love how straightforward firefighters are. I love contributing to safety. So no, I've chosen my industry and I will stick with it.
Before we come to the end, because I want to ask you about what sort of projects and things that you guys and girls are working on at the minute, but I wanted to ask you a couple of what may seem like generic, but I always find some of the most interesting questions around being a business owner and having to evolve yourself personally to now obviously manage a team versus being an individual when you first started. So what kind of advice would you give someone that was trying to start their own company?
What has helped me a lot is being able to do things myself. Because if you can do it yourself, you make all the mistakes yourself. And that helps you to learn in a really fast way. Speaking about mistakes, I have also learned that a 50,000 euro mistake, you can learn from that as much. It's just as valuable as learning from a 50 euro mistake. And sometimes you have to really choose to make the 50 euro mistake of the bigger one. Yes, we have made that mistake building big solutions.
How have you managed to balance that with trusting individuals in your team then? Because like you say, it's nice to be able to make the mistakes yourself, but as you continue to expand, there needs to be a level of trust and allowing people to learn through making their own mistakes. Whereas if you're so used to only doing it yourself and giving yourself that feedback, that's often a very difficult progression for people, because it then involves interpersonal relationships and delivering through others effectively. Yeah.
I must admit we have struggled with this, with a level of perfectionism and also a level of dedication and feeling responsible for the services that we offer. At some point, I called our services a hobby at the start, but at some point you realize this is not a hobby. This is about saving lives.
Yeah, serious stuff.
And helping people being safe. So that creates a certain pressure or anxiety with myself and the team as well. When we first introduced the idea of doing primary alerting, there were some team members heavily against it because of the big responsibility that we would take on. And I thank them for that, for being against this, because that is a voice to be heard and a word of caution to be respected. And yes, we do trust our team members. I fully trust them to make their own mistakes. And I fully trust that it should never be the person that is blamed, but the process, because no life-critical system should be allowed to go down or be disrupted by just a human error. There should be fail-safes. So anytime it happens and we do make mistakes and things go wrong, we try to see how we can fix the process by making it more resilient against mistakes.
I love that. And that is a rare thing to come across, because it's so easy to scapegoat an individual. But like you say, most individuals in your company now, I assume, will have a track record of being quite reliable. They understand the professionalism and importance of the type of work that you do. So if they were to make a mistake, whilst there'll be a certain level of human accountability required, it does give you the opportunity, should you choose, to identify the fact that there is an error in the system that allows that single point of failure.
Yes, exactly. And one of the ways, and I pay respect to Ruben again, one of the ways to prevent errors is by building in automated tests. We have many, many thousands of tests that run automatically as soon as one of our software developers changes a little bit of code. And that code will not be promoted to the actual servers that work for our customers. No, it first has to pass through several layers of quality control. One of those layers being running, I believe, 2,000 or 3,000 automated tests just to check if the system is still operating correctly. And then if something still goes wrong, it cannot be catastrophic because those tests just passed. So it has to be something really small that wasn't captured in the test.
God, I love that. You must be thinking so many steps ahead with something like this. It's such an incredibly exciting thing to be part of. Given, with the greatest of respect, I know the company continues to expand, but looking at how many people are not yet benefiting from utilizing something like this, the potential land grab, an opportunity that lay before you in terms of integrating it with more people, not only in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, but further afield, really tells me, because I know even in the service that I work for, we've probably got a team of 5 people who could be better utilized within the service rather than continually handling crewing on a daily basis. And again, we're not looking to lose anybody's job here. We're looking to make people a bit more efficient in their role and allow them to fix one of the million other problems that the public demand of us on a daily basis. And it excites me to see that this is still only a handful of services deep in the UK, because I think it's got colossal potential for it.
It does. And you're quite right when you say we're not about firing people. There's a lack of firefighters in the world. So if we can streamline processes and save up time and effort in the area of planning and mitigating crewing deficiencies, that time can then immediately be spent as a firefighter doing the actual frontline work. So,
oh, mate, we spend so much time in the bloody office just messing about with covers and detachments and overtime and yesterday's crewing and tomorrow's crewing and sickness and then replan. It takes hours and you feel like you've achieved nothing.
There you go.
You've not got any risk work to do, you've not got any community safety work to do, you've not been out there training. The rest of the crew have been sat outside or sat upstairs doing something, and you need to be getting out there and spending time with the crew rather than sat at a flipping desktop.
Yeah, so not only you lose time and capacity, you lose motivation. People who joined the game to help other people and not to fight some kind of computer system.
Mate, 100%. So as we close, I know we've spoken about so many aspects of it there, but is there any one or two things that you could perhaps share with us, any exciting projects that the company's working on at the moment?
Well, I have to keep some things under the wraps, of course.
Of course, yeah.
But we're looking to further automate certain processes in our system that fix deficiencies before we need planners. So right now, for example, there's fairness in the system. We try to fairly distribute extra shifts across the people who are in need of extra shifts worked or who deserve it. Well, right now, a planner does that job. What if we could do this for the planner? So what if we can create and send out those requests for the days and weeks ahead automatically for a planner to then go into a review role, to just supervise an automated system, say, oh yeah, all right, all the deficiencies that came up with that, exactly, I approve of them, or no, here's a manual override needed because of individual circumstances X, Y, Z, right? So to a higher level of automation can be achieved, I believe. I believe always more flexibility. I think flexibility is key when lives are getting busier. System has to be more flexible too. And one of the ways we are achieving that is actually, this might be a new for many of our customers because we haven't shared it so widely yet, but we're working on a new app that will be purely oriented on usability, so ease of use. And my belief is that 95% of our users maybe should never have to visit the website, but only use a really slick smartphone app to manage their availability and then be sure that when they book off, they did not cause any crewing deficiencies, or when they do, replacement is easily found.
Mate, I absolutely love that. As a manager, it really excites me just the thought process of being able to go to work and focus on the job rather than doing all of this other faff and waffle. And like you perfectly articulated, it just puts a bit of a dampener. You know, when you've had several phone calls over lunch and you have to spend the next few hours in the office versus doing the training that you wanted to go out and do, versus going out and spending time with the communities, and just those thankless hours that you spend on a Sunday night as an on-call manager or something like that trying to have 17 phone calls and text messages and plead and beg with everybody to try and half an hour here and half an hour there, and ultimately still have the uncomfortable conversation with the station manager that you only managed 70% availability because you basically just ran out of enthusiasm at the end of it. You just ran out of time and encouragement to keep, just giving your soul to this black hole that is trying to manage people's availability.
Yeah, I think there you have the most critical factor for especially on-call retained duty system is motivation and goodwill. And I have to shout out to a friend, Steve Sadler, who has just finished a piece of research in the UK about the on-call system. And his conclusion
I hope to be speaking with Steve very soon.
I hope you will.
Individual,
And goodwill is key, and then enable to support.
And it's a diminishing thing. I'm not saying that people aren't interested, but what I'm saying is life is not massively difficult, but it's not as easy as it used to be.
It isn't.
And with many financial challenges and many socioeconomic challenges that are facing people these days, we really need to make a very conscious effort to be removing barriers such as exactly what Fire Service Rota is doing, because these are what may seem small to the service, but are colossal things to the individual, and will be enough for them to say, you know what, I just can't commit to that.
Flexibility. Everybody needs flexibility.
Love it. Cool. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know we've overcome a bit of a time change here, and we've wrestled and managed to get this conversation together. I've loved learning more about it. I'll be honest to everybody, I always do a little bit of research before coming into these conversations, but even for me, it's actually been incredibly enlightening. I know a lot of the stuff that you do is now transitioning onto the more interactive systems like the app and stuff like that. But we will drop a few links in for people, both for the website and most probably an email communication for people to reach out to Fire Service Rota and the team to find out how you can begin to help people solve these solutions in their own services.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. I'll speak to you soon.
Speak soon, man.
Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.